So welcome to Bristech Bytesize, which is the online format of Bristech. It is a slightly different format than we have at the in-person events, and we keep it a little bit punchier. And tonight we've got one talk with Andrea Fabry, and then we'll have Q&A and a panel, but I'll get on to the timings in a second. So for those of you who are new to Bristech, we started as a meetup back in 2013, which seems an age ago now. And 2015, we spawned the conference. And actually last year we did an MLOps event, which was online. And then this year we decided to pause events for good reason, whilst the world recovers from the global pandemic. But we'll be back next year. So watch this space for what's going on in 2022. But on to tonight. So we have an evening of analytics engineering. So Andrea will be giving a talk shortly, and that'll be around 30 minutes. So after the talk, we'll have the Q&A. So if you want to put any questions you have in the chat window, we'll then I'll then curate it a little bit afterwards. We'll unmute, ask people to unmute and ask the questions. And after the questions are exhausted, we'll then vamp to the panel. Hoping to keep it to around an hour, depends on how sort of the meat of the conversation. If it goes over, then do forgive me. So if people could introduce yourselves via the chat window, that'd be brilliant. Very interested to see the kinds of people we have tonight and how you're using DBT or not. So please do use the chat window for that. Cameras on. You were muted when you joined, but if you do, obviously, unmute yourself at the end of the talk to show our appreciation, and also unmute yourself if you're going to ask a question. But that's all, I guess, pretty straightforward. So on to tonight's talk. I'm really thrilled to introduce Andrea Fabry, who is a senior data engineer, and she'll be talking tonight about analytics engineering. And delving into some of the intricacies of DBT, which a tool that I guess has had quite a lot of publicity recently. They've recently also raised some money, so I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot from the Fishtown Analytics, who I believe is still Fishtown Analytics. I don't think they changed their name, but anyway, on to the talk. So Andrea, please do take it away.
Sure. So let me go to screen sharing, and I am going to present. So as Nick said, I'm Andrea Fabry. I'm a senior data engineer at BTS, where we recently switched to DBT. We added DBT to our data stack. So I'm here to tell you about this experience. And tell you what is DBT, why we decided to add it to our stack, how does it fit into your data stack, and what we added it because we thought it would really enhance our analytics engineering workflow. So it is a good time to maybe talk a little bit about what exactly is the analytics engineering workflow and how does DBT make it quicker and easier. So before I start talking about all this, I thought I would just start off by doing a little bit of taking the room temperature and checking in with our feelings. And when I say feelings, I'm specifically thinking of this particular image, the data and AI landscape. This is from 2020. It was published by First Mark, which is a venture fund in New York City. Each year, First Mark updates this, and actually maybe what I should do is I should show you this online. Not that you can see this so much better, but at least it's maybe a little bit better. So each year, First Mark publishes this data landscape document. And if you are anything like me, each year, the update of this document brings about mixed emotions, which is why I said that we should do a little feelings check. In my particular case, it brings about a combination of admiration and anxiety. Admiration at the person whose job it is to squeeze a couple more logos every year onto this already extremely crowded image, and anxiety about having to know all these things, right? Anxiety about like, I don't know what these things, didn't even know I needed this. Do I have to learn this? Every single logo on this page will add some sort of complexity to your data stack, and it will bring the, okay, how do we migrate to this? How do we set this up? How do we maintain this? How do we onboard ourselves? How do we learn it as a new tool? How do we use it efficiently, and so forth? So I'm really just here. I'm going to be very, very forthcoming and upfront. I'm just here to talk about one logo in this sea of logos. And I'm just going to tell you how that one logo fits in with the other logos into the modern data stack. And I will tell you why we decided that the benefits of adding this logo somehow outweigh the pains of the additional complexity. So I'm going to hop back on here and present again. So in order to do this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about VTS. And then I'm going to tell you about DBT. What is DBT? How does it fit into the stack? What is the modern data stack? And then I want to talk about why, the whys, which is we actually did a proof of value with DBT for a few weeks. And in order to run a successful proof of value, we defined upfront what the value would be that would be worth all this added complexity. And for us, this value was that we wanted to write great analytic code. So I'm going to walk you through some smaller examples of how DBT helps us accomplish that. And then, as Nick mentioned, we're going to have time for questions and a panel discussion. And then I also put a whole bunch of resources onto the last slide, which I can send around later. Okay, so about VTS. VTS in a nutshell is a prop tech unicorn. Our mission is to be commercial real estate's modern operating system, the place where deals happen and real-time data comes to life. We have been expanding our data products steadily over the last year, and including real estate's first real-time industry index, which has been quoted by the Wall Street Journal and Reuters and lots of other publications as well. So just as overall introduction, we are a New York, our headquarters are in New York, but we're an international company. We do have a London office, and we are growing steadily and we're hiring. So I put the careers section in there just to, in case you're interested and you wanna look around. Okay, so what is DBT and how does it fit into the modern data stack? Well, let's start with what is the modern data stack, right? And I think the simplest way to define the modern data stack would be that it is, in a mathematical sense, a function. You have all these different sources of data. You have event logs, you have a copy of your application database, you have all sorts of third-party applications that your teams use, like Salesforce or HubSpot or Jira or Trello or any other tools. And then you have things like even old-fashioned things like Excels or Google Sheets that contain very important pieces of data like projections for the year ahead or sales targets or things like that. So you take all these inputs, and what you want to do with them is you want to turn them into outputs. And these outputs could be dashboards that teams can monitor. These outputs can be some sort of work or investigation your data analysts do into why conversions went up or down. It could be some sort of sophisticated complex data product like a recommender system that your data scientists put together to serve up in the application. Or it can be some sort of simpler machine learning product, like you put together some sort of prediction on which customers will churn, and you pipe that data back into Salesforce or HubSpot or any other applications that your sales teams or client advisors use, and you make sure that they have these risk factors popping up as they do their everyday work. So in the simplest of terms, the modern data stack is everything that is between where the data is created and where the data is consumed, the eyeballs and the people who will benefit from it. Within this whole array of tools that help you accomplish things, DBT just helps you do one thing, which is once you took all your data from these inputs and loaded it into your database, it helps you prep that data for use in the outputs. So you have extract and load tools on the one side, and then you have DBT, which is really only focusing on the transform step of the ELT, the extract, load, and transform. So in our particular case, our data stack has a sort of simplified representation. DBT sits on top of our data warehouse, and it basically reads data from one database, from our staging database, and it transforms that data and pipes it back into another database to make it available to other applications. And you see them predominantly we use Tableau and Looker. So DBT is just for very specifically this one particular step in your data stack. So what is great code, and why did we switch to DBT? How does it help us in this whole process of taking data and transforming it for use in various end applications? Well, we started with this book. We started with the question, okay, what is great code? And we started with this book called Write Great Code. It's actually a 3-volume book. And we just basically copied all the attributes of great code that Randall Hyde written up, which is great code uses the CPU efficiently, uses memory efficiently, uses system resources efficiently, is easy to read and maintain, follows a consistent set of style guidelines, uses an explicit design that follows established software engineering conventions, is easy to enhance, it's well tested and robust, and is well documented. Okay, great. That seems to be absolutely acceptable for great code in software engineering. What does this mean for analytics, though? So we basically took all of these criteria, and we organize them around 4 major buckets. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to write great analytic code. So we wanted a tool that helps us write modular and efficient code that is well formatted, bits of code that are efficient and are easy to read and maintain and enhance. So basically read and rewrite. And then we wanted to create transformations that our end users can use with confidence and ease. So they can use it with confidence because it's well tested, and they can use it with ease because it's well documented. So what does this mean in practice? Like, what does this look like when you're in code? Well, modular and efficient, in order to give you a good example of that, I'm gonna tell you that we actually follow the star schema in our data warehouse. And in case you're not familiar with it, the star schema is the basic unit of the Kimball style dimensional model. It consists of a fact table that calculates a metric and a number of dimension tables that help describe that metric in more detail by adding the who, what, where, when, why, and how. So let's say you have a fact table, which contains various aggregations about daily sales, like the number of products sold and the amount of sales in pound or dollars or euro or whatever else you're using. And then your dimension tables are things like customers dimension table, which gives you more detail about the customers that made those purchases, the products dimension table, which gives you more information about the products they purchased, the stores where the purchases occurred, and then dates on which they occurred. So we actually use the star schema. We don't have customers table. We do have a dimension table called accounts because everything in our project rolls up to accounts. One of the things that we use from Kimball is conformed dimension tables. That means that the dimensions that you use in your product are the exact same across all of your reports and all of your use cases and user groups and departments and disciplines. So customer is a customer for marketing, and the same customer is a customer for customer success because you arrived at a common definition of customer. So in our particular case, we build one accounts dimension table, which is one wide denormalized table. And normally, if you wanted to, let's say our accounts, let's say it is true, our accounts have account owners and client advisors assigned to them. Let's say I want to see account owner and client advisor in dashboard A, dashboard B, and dashboard C. Normally, we would make all the joins that are required to get this one piece of information of account owner in dashboard A, dashboard B, dashboard C. But in this particular case, we make that join in one place, create a dimension account table that contains all the information that we want to know about accounts, and all of the dashboards just take it from here. That's the module. So the whole idea behind this is that it is if you only write the code in one place, and it only builds one at a regular cadence with all of our DBT runs, and then it is reusable throughout your project. We actually use Looker for BI purposes. So this particular one is reusable throughout our Looker project. What else does modularity mean? And this is a little sample code snippet from our accounts dimension table that shows you exactly how many joins it takes to add a client advisor or an account owner to the account. We actually, one of the ways we use modularity is we use the package for Salesforce. So a lot of the standard transformations that Salesforce data needs to go through to get to a usable state are abstracted away in this package. And then additionally, we have certain standard cleaning steps that we have to do every single time. In terms of accounts, we always want to filter out things like demo and test and archived and deleted and those kinds of things. And because that is something that we want to make sure that happens when we're looking at accounts or when we're looking at users or properties or things like that all across our project, we just created this macro for it for this recurring cleaning task and abstracted it away. Okay, so this is modular and efficient, and what does well-tested and documented look like? And for this, we actually, most of the time, try to use test-driven development, which the way it works in data and specifically for transformations is that even before you wrote a line of that code that you just saw on the previous slide, you start by writing a YAML for documentation. And you say, okay, I'm building the dimension account, the dimension table called accounts. I want to have the most minimal sort of MVP table. I want to have account ID, a couple of other foreign keys like employer ID, Salesforce ID, whatnot. And I want to have the account name, I want to have account persona, I'm going to have account owner, right? So you write all these things up. If there are any specific gotchas in there, like, oh, I don't want to include deleted records, or I don't want to include account owners that have been reassigned. You put all those things into your documentation, and then you write tests. And the tests, the DBT comes with a lot of simple tests out of the box. Things like testing for unique and not null on your primary key. So in this particular case, that's a really critical thing, because whatever happens, I just want to have one row of data per account. So I really want to make sure that the account ID is my primary key. So you run the test, it will probably fail because you haven't written any pieces of code. And then you take it from red to green by writing your code. And every time you add a new feature, a new join, or you bring in more information, or let's say you decide to add something more complex, like the count of users associated with that account, every single time you can run the test to make sure that you're not adding something inadvertently that is going to cause fan out on your data. And later on, actually, these tests will become part of your test of suites that the CI runs. So not only I cannot trip myself up and join in something and cause fan out, but once I push my code, nobody else can do that. And add something downstream or upstream that's gonna mess with my original intent here. And then another critical thing that this really helps you to accomplish is you write your code, but then you can refactor because DBT gives you a really nice DAG, view of your DAG. This is actually a vastly simplified DAG. I removed lots of things from it. But what this helps you do is you can take a look at how it builds. If you need to change something, let's say your team switch from Salesforce to HubSpot. This makes it really easy where you need to replace Salesforce tables with HubSpot tables. It also helps you think about additional things that you can test. Maybe you want to add those count of users and you want to make that an additional step in between the first iteration of this and the final iteration of this. So you want to put that in that extra step in there and put some additional tests on it. So some of the things that you might want to look at and test from and test each of your transformation steps are things like what is the grain of your table? Is my primary key unique per accounts in the accounts dimension table? Are the source tables and target tables related as they should be? Do all the IDs come from one into the other and vice versa? So do I have my account IDs in the account dimension table? Does that match the ones in the source tables? Does that match all of the ones in Salesforce? And does that match all the ones that are coming from the VTS.accounts table? And then you can also write your own custom data tests, which will, you can, whatever you can write in SQL, DBT can test for you at a regular cadence. So you can write a SQL that says no lowercase accounts name should equal demo, for instance. So for us, in short, these were the main benefits that really outweighed the additional complexity, which is we could create these little modules of building blocks that we can reuse throughout our project, build and test in one place and reuse throughout our project. And we can be sure that they are always correct and nothing happens to the various transformation steps that build upon each other because we test them. And then we also know how to use them and how to reuse them because we can truly document them for all the people that work within DBT. So for us, these were the four main benefits. I actually put a blog post in here in the resources from the Brooklyn Data Company, which for us, it was 4 things that we loved about DBT. For them, it's 6 things that they love about DBT. But I also, put some other pieces in there that I thought were really helpful. There's an entire free course called DBT Learn that you can sign up for. And it is super helpful because what they do is they basically go back and forth between DBT and Snowflake and show you how what you write in YAML and SQL renders in Snowflake and how it, generates your production versus development environments and things like that. So that I would truly recommend. And then the other resource that I truly recommend is this Auditing with the DAX video, which really shows you how you can use the DAX to sort of think about refactoring and redoing what you have already written and making it smarter and more efficient and more modular or compact. So that was it. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Cool. Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to ask everyone to unmute so that we can show our appreciation. So thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
Sometimes we have dogs barking. We even had a budgerigar featuring in the applause once. So Andrea, thank you so much for that. That was great as a sort of introduction to DBT. We do have a few questions. So I think I'm just going to go from the top. Emma, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
So it's not a DBT question. Sorry about that. But it was, I saw in your tech stack you were using Looker and Tableau.
Yes.
And I was wondering whether you used them in combination, so you had Tableau set over the top of Looker, or whether you used them for slightly different use cases.
We use them side by side. We use Looker first and foremost for self-service, which if you haven't seen this recent blog post by Ben Stencil about self-service versus ad hoc analysis, I would truly recommend it. It was very, very good. So we use it for self-service, Looker, but we find that Looker is actually quite cumbersome for one-off analysis, right? Because you have to make the tables, and you make the views, then you make the explorers. It's like you have to go through all these steps to do anything and visualize your data. And our analysts actually preferred Tableau for that. I probably wouldn't have come with Tableau. I don't know Tableau that well, but they love it. And you know, if like first rule of BI is whatever people they use is the good tool there. So
great.
That's that we have exactly. So we use Looker, but we struggle with ad hoc analysis at the moment.
yes,
and we also struggle with the visualization quality in Looker.
yes.
So I was just wondering whether you were using Tableau that way as well.
And I think what is really, really brilliant about this piece is that he says, we're really debasing this by calling it ad hoc analysis, because this is pretty much the most important analysis we will ever make. These are those one-off decisions or one-way doors that you walk through, and then, you know, you really need to get all your ducks in a row. So I really love that. And I felt like that really helped us justify why we need yet another tool.
Cool, thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
George, do you want to unmute and ask your question that was in the chat?
Yeah, so was DBT used as a replacement tool, or was it something brand new that you introduced to sort of fill a gap that you had there?
So we actually previously used LookML for this, for the transformation steps, which is something I would truly not recommend, especially if you have, you know, a lot of data or a very complex project or a lot of transformations. I think the alternative, one of the alternatives I could think of to DBT would be just running your pipeline with something like Airflow and then adding the transformations separate from the extracted load, and then just, you know, using SQL scripts for the same sort of thing.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
And so just going down that list, Liam, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like you are, as an analytics engineer, you are kind of developing you're kind of responsible for the entire analytic part before you then get to a stakeholder. But in a more traditional environment where you would have data engineers, data analysts taking the output from the engineers and then outputting to business stakeholders, does DBT provide any value to the analysts? Or is it just valuable for the engineers kind of building the warehouse and the output there? That's
a very good question. It would be, if if your analysts are comfortable with it and you can onboard them, this is a great tool for them. So that being said, you know, we have been working in there for a long time, working with migration, and our analysts are still a little bit skittish about getting into, I think it's a factor of what you're used to, right? They are used to writing things in Snowflake and getting them done quickly. In the Snowflake worksheets, getting them done quickly, handing them off to the data engineers and saying, okay, I'm moving on to the next project. So I think it's a lot of not just thinking about the tools, but thinking about how the tools fit the workflows and who's in there, who's developing in dbt, who's handing off what at what stage, is something that we're still experimenting with, I would say.
Cool. Thanks.
So any other burning questions before we vamp to the panel? Gone? No? Okay, great. So I'm really pleased to welcome two new voices who you've heard a little bit from there already. So Emma, I don't know if you want to really briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Emma Stowell. I am the Director of Data Science Analytics and Insights, I think, at a company called Immersive Labs. So we're a cyber tech startup. So we are all about the weaknesses in humans in organizations to face cyber attacks. And we offer a lot of different things. And yeah, we use a very similar tech stack to Andrea. So it's quite interesting to hear.
Right. Well, maybe we'll hear a little bit about that in a second. But I'd also like to introduce Liam. Liam, do you want to just quickly say something?
Sure. So I'm Liam Butcher. I lead data analytics at a financial services kind of product startup, which is currently very early in its journey. And so there's a huge amount of kind of analytic culture to build up and, you know, data culture and stuff to build. The challenges here are very different to my kind of previous experience, which was in large kind of global corporate structures where pretty much everything was made for me. It was a lot easier to do this kind of thing. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge at the moment, and I think that now is probably the right time for us to get involved in a tool like dbt to kind of build it in on the ground level.
So the title of this talk is sort of analytics engineering. So I guess we're talking about bringing in some principles of engineering to analytics. So could I sort of put the question out there? You know, is that a good idea? Do you think all the the queries and code should be in a repo and as part of the CI process that any software engineer would sort of recognize? Would someone like to maybe comment on that part of it?
I can talk about it. Coming from, until my current company, I came from very traditional sort of data teams who weren't working in the CI pipeline way at all. And then coming into Immersive, we're using dbt and we're using GitHub, and we work in a very CI, and the benefits are amazing. It's a massive learning curve when we recruit new analysts, because we literally have everybody in our team using dbt, whether a data analyst, or our data scientists don't, but our data analysts and our analytics engineers all use dbt. And so that heavy reliance on like GitHub is a big learning curve for people. We've made a few mistakes with passwords in public repositories as a result of that, and like a learning that we need to give a lot more training to those analysts when they come into the business, because they won't have been exposed to those tools. But I think the benefits massively outweigh the risks. Everybody knows about the data model a lot more. We have like proper peer review in all our code, which we've never had anywhere I've worked because of that. We can, if we made a change to our data model and we break the whole thing, it's very easy for us to revert back to an earlier version of the data model. So yeah, massively beneficial.
So do you think it's a fair ask then? Because you're not just asking people to learn about dbt at all, you're asking them to learn about Git and all of the intricacies of using a repository tool as well.
I think if you set them up to succeed, so having like, we have like a business Udemy account, and like I've identified a series of courses so that a new starter onboarding, we're not expecting them to know that. We can support them through that process of learning those new tools.
Okay. And Liam, what would you have a comment on that in terms of analysts moving a step towards you know, the engineering side and maybe out of their comfort zone?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so in the past, I've kind of treated it as going the other way and thinking that analysts could actually be less technical, because so many of the tools that we use now are trying to kind of democratize analytics for people and make it easier, and, you know, drag and drop, and, you know, you read kind of Tableau's advertising and you're led to believe that anybody can kind of create a dashboard and stuff. And so I think there's two sides to it, because you've got that one side. If you're an organization that has the luxury of being able to have real kind of solid dedicated engineering function and a real solid dedicated analytics function, and they work well together, then it might make sense to keep those two things apart, because then you can have kind of specific skill sets each side. But realistically, most organizations don't have that resource and that luxury. And so for now, when we have a lot more people are in these roles now, where they are maybe not on paper, but certainly kind of fulfilling the role of an analytic engineer, where you're expected to learn all these things and know all these things. And so I think that, you know, from what I've seen of a tool like DBT, it helps to kind of like bridge that gap, I think, and just make it a lot easier for people to be able to own both of those things and kind of have like that combined analytics engineer role. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. Right now, I'm very, very interested in this all, because it's yeah, I think it would solve a lot of issues.
Mm. And I was wondering whether, like, you know, DBT, how you actually using YAML for its configuration and stuff like that, whether kind of like there's sort of steps too far in terms of, you know, exposing people to the intricacies of that kind of thing. Do you see that potentially just being abstracted away, so that, you know, actually it's more UI driven perhaps than you know, command line?
Is there an option for that in DBT for like I think it might ring a bell. There's like a DBT development environment, or like something that's a bit more user friendly, yeah, not code, right? Like it's a bit more user friendly.
Yeah, well, maybe for Andrea, it's the, you know, in terms of the actual developer experience of using the tooling. Did you find it quite clunky, or did you actually find it easy to use?
So I used it in two different ways. In a previous role, I used it locally. So I would use it in command line, and then I would hop on over to Snowflake and look at the output and things like that. In this particular case, we're using DBT Cloud, which combines all the Git functions, the command line functions, and the query and everything else. I still miss my editor. I don't miss having to remember all the command line instructions, because those pop up as recommendations in the IDE. I think in terms of Emma's comment, I completely agree. And I think for a simplified Git workflow, it's really great to have that, you know, button that turns orange when you need to pull from master, and, you know, it has all these very simple instructions for using Git. So I would say, yeah, mixed. There are certain aspects of working locally that I miss, and that being said, I could still set that up. I just
okay. So you actually could come down to personal preference, really.
Yes, so you could be on DBT Cloud and still work locally, and that's
okay. But presumably DBT Cloud is a managed service rather than
running. Yes, okay. And you can also spin up your own DBT, and yeah. So there's open source and there's managed service that you pay on a monthly basis.
So, okay. So you've got three options. You can run it locally for testing. You can run your own instance on EC2 or whatever, and then you could run it in a managed service that they provide, and there's a price attached. Yeah, okay. So we've been focusing a little bit on the engineering side. I want to maybe sort of DBT, come on to DBT itself. And so as I understand it, the reusability is kind of like the beating heart of DBT, having that schematic and knowing which queries depend on which. Is that a correct reading of that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was it. I think there are lots of other people that love the packages, love building their own packages, you know, all those kinds of things that come with it. But, you know, I would love to hear what others experienced or thought.
Yes, Emma, you're using DBT already,
Yeah.
Immersive. What was it that for you that is the main benefit, and is it that reusability and the modularity?
I think it's exactly what Andrea said. For me, it's the simplicity of it, that you just write a load of select statements and it worries about the dependencies for you. And it's really one of those tools that when I read about it before I started using it, I was like, this is really complicated. I can't understand it. And as soon as I wrote a few select statements in it, and I was like instantly in love, and it became like the thing that I told all my cool friends about. Let's call them that. Said, how do I not know about this tool sooner, and why doesn't everything work in this way? And then you've got like the advantages that, like with using the sort of Ginger and the macros, when you write something and you've got like more flexibility than you get just from SQL stored procedures without but you don't, the beauty is you don't need to understand that stuff to use it. So most of our analysts haven't written a macro. And most of our workflow was done without macros. So you can make it as simple as or as complicated as you like, I think.
Because Ginger is a templating tool where you can have like for loops and stuff in, can't you? It's kind of like, it's more like a programming experience perhaps, but as a template mechanism.
Yeah.
And SQL in particular, I always crack that joke about SQL, that it's like Duplo, you know, the Lego for toddlers, that whatever you can build from Lego, you can build from Duplo. It's just going to take a lot more space. So I feel like anything that you write in SQL is going to be really, really long and expensive. And sometimes those Ginger for loops really help to just cut down on the amount of time. Case when this is this, label it that, and when this is this, you know, those kinds of things you could just do with Ginger.
And is it the case that, you know, when you're materializing views or materializing new tables using DBT, there is a set of conventions for how you should be naming all the things you're creating? And presumably that's nothing to do with DBT at all. That's just convention within sort of data warehouse land. Is that correct?
So I think this is the part where DBT really shows that it was started by a group of enthusiastic analysts who also consult and have very strong opinions about how you should organize your project, what you shouldn't be naming things, how you should keep it. So if you go on the DBT blog, and DBT Discourse also has all sorts of articles, it's like our naming conventions, how to keep your data warehouse organized, how to organize your project, you know, all those kinds of things. I think that's, and Emma, I would love to hear what your experience was, but I think that was definitely a learning curve. So first time around, figuring out which folder do I put this in, and is this a staging underscore or an int underscore or a FCT underscore table. Was a little bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. There's definitely around staging, development, and like production schemas, they've built it in a very set way, which is clearly the way they believe it should be done. And there are ways of overriding those defaults, but they don't make it easy for you to do anything than their prescribed method of naming your folders and how you organize and structure your projects. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. And would you say that's an Achilles heel, or is that kind of like just something to live with? It's opinionated, but it's okay. They're good opinions.
It's a minor grumble for me, I would say.
And I would say if I could go back and give advice to, former me, I would say just stick with the DBT conventions, because when you get people who know DBT, it's so much easier for them to work in your project. We actually went ahead and created bronze, silver, and gold data folders instead of the staging marts and those kinds of things that they recommend. And it's not working out so well.
Don't fight it. Just go with it.
Yeah.
And Liam, maybe could I bring you in here, because obviously you're sort of embarking on making the culture and making the right steps in terms of building all this out. Does this give you any sort of pause for thought, or do you think that this is kind of like DBT is what you want to do in terms of building out this stack?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so having kind of seen the other side of a very established organization that never had a great data culture and had lots of different pockets of teams doing lots of different things, and never, like expecting an analyst to be writing a presentation at 11 p.m. when they're like really bleary-eyed trying to determine what an active account is, or like how to determine a transaction, those kind of things, like to try and get rid of as much as possible of that kind of problem that I've seen and kind of seen the fallout from, and to try and deal with a lot of kind of those metrics and like consistency and get it all done early on. That's kind of what I want to do like now, like right in this early stage of the journey. And I've thought about different ways of trying to do that before, using tools that I'm already aware of, but nothing really seemed to fit the brief properly until started hearing about DBT. And so yeah, this has kind of really sold it to me. I mean, your guys, the way that you kind of cemented or said how good a tool is, I've just kind of cemented it in my head. Really, I think that it's a go. I'm sold. Sign me up.
But presumably, like not everybody in their data warehouse is going to be using facts and dimensions, or the Kimball model from the get-go. I'm just wondering, is DBT potentially overkill, or is it still a good fit and a good use case for people who just want to be running queries against a raw data set?
I think yes. I think it's still it depends on how you model your data. So if you want to do what Liam is talking about, which is active accounts, I always want the analyst to have access to, you need to create some sort of table for that. Whether you use, one big denormalized table for that, or you use star schema or snowflake schema or data vault, I feel like those are just design patterns in data modeling that help you sort of organize your project and think about, it's kind of like labels on the drawers of the dressers. It's not necessarily perfect, but if I know that it's, we're gonna have some sort of aggregation, I'm gonna first look in the facts table section to see, do I already have this or do I have to build this? And
sorry to change the thought there, but I was wondering, does that make DBT a good prototyping tool then, in order to explore what the potential model should be? Because you mentioned the sort of refactoring is very good at that, because you're constantly rerunning it and testing it. So does that mean you can try out the data model quickly?
Yes, and there are some packages, not for star schema or snowflake schema, but there is a data vault package. So if you happen to follow the data vault principles, people use that for the package for sort of pre-aggregate data.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good. So it fits kind of any use case. I don't know whether Emmy, you're actually feeding any machine learning downstream of your data warehouse. But presumably, like DBT fits, it just fits as part of the model where it can be upstream of, say, a feature store or something else.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we're not that advanced. Like our first data scientist came to work for us 3 months ago, so we've not got a heavy reliance yet. My thought is that we would definitely use DBT for some aggregation for them, but some of the bigger data sets, it might slow down our data warehouse too much. But yeah, and then going back to your earlier question about when's the right time to implement it, just to say, before I started at Immersive, there was like one really analyst working there on their own, quite a junior analyst, and they'd actually implemented DBT before I joined. And although they weren't doing a lot with it, they were just doing a few simple transformations. And what that meant was when I came in and built out a star schema, all the logic was in the same place, ready for me to just pick a lot of that up and put it into the star schema and like take the lessons they'd learned and then build out my star schema really quickly. Wow. on top of what they'd done already, without having to start working out loads of dependencies again.
So actually it sped things up. It was a good place to work from.
Yeah, it wasn't any wasted effort from like doing stuff that they weren't sure about, because it's, even if you write a complex set of code and rules and then you're like, oh, I can't be bothered to rewrite this again, you can just refer to that in a lazy way in your star schema, and then when you've got more time, come back to it, pick it up, and then rewrite it in the right way. Wow.
Okay. So that sort of validates the whole sort of prototyping thing. Then you can try things out easily and quickly. It's I'm just wondering whether we could just briefly touch on data quality, because I know that DBT isn't focused on necessarily on data quality, but we did talk about testing. I wonder how this sits along other tools, Great Expectations or things like that, where you can actually make assertions against data, and so that you can flag up quickly when you have data quality issues. Is that something that you already do at Immersive, or is that kind of coming?
Yeah, I mean, we've implemented in the last few months. We've implemented some of the basic tests that Andrea talked about, so like primary key constraints, null values. I'm not sure whether we're going to do it in DBT or in Looker, but where you like get a few test cases for your data set that whatever you do with your model, those test cases shouldn't change. I believe you can do that in DBT as well. So yeah, we're definitely on that road, and I think it's a lot neater and better than any of the like traditional tools that are doing that stuff.
Okay.
So I think for us, it comes out of the box with certain basic tests. Then you can also do things like you can put in there seed data or a CSV that you want to validate things against on a regular basis. So that's also really helpful. And then there is a package, again, I keep on saying this, there is a package that someone wrote that mimics the functionality of Great Expectations, which is written in Python and uses a lot of pandas. In SQL, for DBT, I think it's called DBT Expectations or something like that. We haven't even gotten that far. As Emma says, we're just so happy that we can, prevent simple but really, really easy to do mistakes, like accidentally tripling the number of accounts in our project, which we've done before.
So it sounds like with DBT Expectations, you've got another logo appearing on that gigantic map that we could almost see at the beginning of the talk. I was just wondering, how do we as data engineers, data analysts, data scientists keep on top of all of the explosion of tooling that has happened?
You can't. I mean, it's impossible. Yeah. There is no way that you would ever be able to do that kind of thing. But you just you meet people in this kind of environment and hear about DBT, and then suddenly it's the best thing, and implement stuff like that. I could not. it would be 3 people's jobs, I reckon, to just try and keep on top of that kind of thing. And
it's accelerating. There are only more tools coming out, whether they're open source or paid for tools. So it's the top of the hour. We have had our hour. So I'm just wondering whether any closing thoughts or remarks or things we haven't touched on from any of the panel.
Well, so I just want to kind of thank you for having me here, and thank you for the presentation, Andrew and Emma, for your input and your insight into DBT. I mean, again, I've been looking for a tool that does this for a while, and I wish that I could go back a few years to when I was working in an environment that really, you know, could have benefited from implementing it then. But yeah, really fascinating and great insight.
Andrea, Emma, any final thoughts?
I just wanted to say the same thing. Thank you for having me here. It was really, I feel like it's always such a pleasure to talk to other people who are going through the same things and, you know, trying to solve the same problems. And maybe circling back to your previous comment, I think that's how we learn about the things that work and the logos that we should be aware of, as opposed to the logos that are just there and never touch our lives.
Wonderful.
And I was just going to say, Andrea, that was a really good presentation. I took a lot away from it. I'm going to share it with my team tomorrow and some of the lessons. And yeah, great. Likewise, thanks for having me. Thanks for the last minute invite. And I'm glad I found the time.
Thank you to everyone. I mean, yes, thanks for being involved at short notice. I realized it was a bit touch and go, but I just want to finish with a few slides here. So we do record all of these talks. I'm a few months behind. I do apologize. I have a small baby, so evenings are at a premium, but all the videos are there, briz.tech/videos. We've got a couple of other data engineering talks coming up. Next month, we've got Richie Vink talking about Polars, which is his pandas killer. So it's the fastest data frame library you've never heard of. And the following month, we have Kevin from Prefect, who is talking about Prefect, and which is an alternative to Apache Airflow. So thank you to Andrea, thanks to our panelists, and also thanks to our sponsors, which makes Bristech happen. So they are OVO, Energy, Storm, Oracle, Cloud Infrastructure, and GoCo Group, who actually have been now bought by Future Publishing. So if you fancy any of those events, do check out a meetup, and we will hopefully be back next year with a bigger event for the conference, and that might even be in person, who knows, if we're all lucky enough. So yeah, so thank you very much for coming. Have a great evening, and hopefully see you next month. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.